Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping entirely away from the everyday surface-level noise of the stock market. Instead, we're diving deep into the hidden, highly forensic world of financial markets. It's an absolutely fascinating space where billions, literally billions of transactions happen in the blink of an eye, and where abstract, fragmented data has to be transformed into undeniable evidence. So let me ask you this. How do you actually prove a crime when it's buried in millions, or maybe even billions of data points? Imagine walking into a chaotic market crime scene. But here's the catch. There are no fingerprints. There are no physical weapons. The truth is completely buried in fragmented clues that are scattered across totally different servers, complex algorithms, and all sorts of communication platforms. Okay, let's really dive into this and uncover exactly how financial investigators and regulators solve this massive modern-day puzzle. Right off the bat, the first major hurdle we have to tackle is what investigators call the single trade problem. You see, looking at a single trade record, it's honestly a lot like finding one isolated footprint on a massive, totally crowded beach. Sure, it proves that someone stood there for a split second. It shows an action took place, but it tells us absolutely nothing about the overarching crime. Where did that person come from? Where were they going? What was the trader's actual intent? By getting regulators to look at just one isolated trade, bad actors are effectively hiding in plain sight. And that isolated view, it is incredibly dangerous. Why? Because of some really severe forms of market abuse. We're talking about insider dealing, spoofing, layering, front-running, marking the close, wash trading, the whole shebang. These are highly sophisticated offenses, and they all share one absolutely critical characteristic. They are pattern-based and deeply, deeply sequence-dependent. Think about it. It is literally impossible to assess whether a trader is maliciously layering an order book to manipulate prices or if they're just executing a totally legitimate, complex strategy if you're only looking at a single trade record. The misconduct only reveals itself in the pattern. Well, that begs the question, how on earth do we capture that pattern? How do we take this chaotic sea of abstract data and turn it into a financial investigator's ultimate forensic science? The answer lies in an incredibly powerful capability known as trade reconstruction. Let's define this so we're all on the same page. Trade reconstruction is the process of rebuilding, in a highly reliable and reviewable way, the full life cycle of a trade or order from available records, data, and communications. And just to be clear, this isn't just downloading a quick spreadsheet. No way. It means painstakingly recreating exactly who placed an order, precisely when it was entered, how it was modified, where it was routed, when it was executed or canceled, and then digging up the specific communications that explain exactly why it all happened. Now, there is a massive contrast we need to understand here, because it's exactly where so many organizations get things completely wrong. They confuse mere data retention with a true evidential control capability. Honestly, from a professional standpoint, having terabytes upon terabytes of data is actually a liability, not an asset, if your systems and your timestamps can't seamlessly communicate with one another. Storing huge volumes of unlinked data basically means nothing. And evidential control capability means you have the real power to link those records coherently across different systems, timestamps, users, venues, and communications. Simply put, if you can't link it, you cannot explain what happened. And this brings us right to the regulatory reality we live in. Frameworks like ESMA's MiFID II and the FCA, they are not messing around here. They explicitly demand consistent, structured, and reviewable records. Effective surveillance and reporting under these market abuse frameworks depend heavily on this exact reconstructive capability. Their whole regime is built on the understanding that just monitoring the market in real time, it just isn't enough anymore. Competent authorities must be able to completely understand and verify the trading behavior well after the event has actually occurred. So how is this actually done in the real world? Well, we are going to methodically build an evidential timeline right now. I want you to mentally put yourself in the shoes of a forensic investigator, carefully piecing together those fragmented clues straight from the market floor. Let's do this. Let's walk through a trade's life cycle. Picture this. At exactly 9:01 a.m., boom, we see the order entry. Just 4 seconds later, at 9:05 a.m., a modification occurs. By 9:12 a.m., we track the routing. At 9:15 a.m., the execution hits, and finally, at 9:18 a.m., the cancellation of the remaining balance. This is exactly how firms physically reconstruct the precise sequence of events, literally second by second, to see what really went down. Suddenly, the data is no longer abstract, right? It forms a clear, unshakable narrative. But to successfully build that flawless timeline, You've got to have the right materials in place beforehand. You absolutely need highly accurate timestamps, clear account and trader identifiers, complete venue data and execution records, and, where relevant, seamless links to communications and client instructions. All these elements must be perfectly integrated into a firm's systems. Actually, let me just add, if your timestamps are even slightly inconsistent across systems, the entire sequence completely breaks down.
Okay, moving on to the critical phase, catching the market abusers. Because having a pristine timeline is one thing, but how do firms and regulators actually close the case when a suspicious surveillance alert suddenly lights up their radar?
When an alert fires off, investigators immediately zero in on the order book behavior. They deeply scrutinize the pre-trade activity to see what the market looked like right before the trader acted. They meticulously track the rapid amendments and cancellations. They evaluate the fills, the resulting positions, and, of course, the post-trade effects. They reconstruct this entire sequence to answer one vital question. Does this alert reflect a perfectly legitimate trading rationale, or are we looking at genuine, calculated misconduct? But here's the thing. A sequence of numbers alone always leaves a little room for doubt. To establish true intent and awareness, investigators must compare the trading timeline directly against chats, emails, or voice records. Combining the hard mathematical sequence of trading with the very human element of communication surveillance, that is exactly how you nail down a trader's true intent. It completely bridges the gap between what actually happened and why they did it. And when a firm actually matures this capability, it transforms into an incredibly versatile multi-tool. It lets firms rapidly investigate internal alerts, confidently respond to really complex regulator questions like inquiries from FINRA, and firmly defend themselves against false allegations of market abuse. It powerfully supports suspicious transaction and order report or store decisions, helps evidence best execution, and proactively identifies a firm's own hidden system gaps like missing records. It is, without a doubt, a fundamental pillar of robust compliance. Which really drives home the core takeaway of our time together today. Ultimately, trade reconstruction is all about turning fragmented, chaotic records into a coherent, totally unassailable account of what actually happened in the market. Because without this capability, firms and regulators are essentially flying blind. Sure, they might see suspicious outcomes, they might spot the smoke, but they are entirely defenseless when it comes to proving the sequence, the context, or the actual intent behind them. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the mechanics of market reconstruction. As you walk away today, I really want to leave you with this final provocative question to ask about your own environment. Your firm has the data, but can it tell the story?